everybody, and welcome back to my channel. As you can see, I have a new guest with me today. I gave birth to my daughter, Miss Dahlia Jane. She is as perfect as can be, and I'm here to share with you guys my positive birth story during a pandemic. So I gave birth to her on July 21st. She was born at 2:32 p.m. and she weighs 6 pounds, 5 ounces, 19 inches long. So she was definitely tiny like we always thought, but 6 pounds, 5 ounces is still a pretty healthy weight, so it wasn't concerningly tiny, just definitely on the smaller side, but nothing out of the ordinary. But yeah, I'm just gonna get right into my birth story. So I was actually induced. I ended up needing to be induced. If you guys have been following along with my vlogs, you know I didn't want to be induced. I was trying to induce labor naturally as best as I could. I was trying all of the methods and the techniques and every idea under the sun except for like the extreme ones. I just wanted her to come naturally, obviously, because that's better for mom and for baby. But I ended up being induced, and I agreed to it because I didn't want her to get too much bigger, and the risks for me outweighed the benefits of waiting for her to come. But looking back now, she would have come like 2 days later probably on her own. But I still don't have any regrets because my birth story and birth experience was so positive. So yeah, I went to be induced. Our induction was at 6 a.m. so that's when we got to the hospital, and we had to like fill out paperwork and yada yada yada. So we got into our room at about 6:40, and around 7 something my doctor came in and she broke my water. She checked me, and I hadn't made any progress since my last appointment, which was really surprising to me. I was still only 2 centimeters dilated, 90% effaced. But she broke my water and my fluid was clear, so that was a good sign. And immediately after she broke my water, I started having contractions. And they were about 4 minutes apart, and they were mild. They were very doable, but I was just like, wow, okay, this is already starting. And then about half an hour later is when they got me hooked up to the Pitocin. As soon as they started the Pitocin, my contractions got like 2 to 3 minutes apart, and they were uncomfortable, like pretty uncomfortable right off the bat. And they were hooked me up to the monitors, and I also tested positive for group B strep, so I needed an IV. And the IV, I wanted it in my left arm, but it ended up having to be in my right arm because of my veins. And I was just very uncomfortable and very discouraged right off the bat because I was already so uncomfortable. And I also had all these like monitors and IVs, and I couldn't get comfortable. I couldn't get into a position that I wanted to get in at all. So when labor first started, I was bouncing on the ball a little bit, but it just felt terrible. Like, it didn't feel good. It felt very uncomfortable and very unnatural. And so I was having a really hard time right off the bat, just mentally, because I had already decided in my head that my next labor I wanted to have in a birth center with no monitors, and I just wanted it to be natural and free. So yeah, my husband was trying to encourage me, and he was literally amazing. I couldn't have gotten through it without him, but he was encouraging me the whole time and just telling me that I was doing a good job and that I could do it. And so yeah, after about an hour of being on Pitocin, my contractions were very uncomfortable, like really bad, probably like a 6 on the pain scale for me at least. And I got nauseous, and I was drinking some apple juice, and I was drinking water. I was trying to keep myself very hydrated, and I got very nauseous, and I needed to throw up. And I threw up so much liquid, and my husband said that was the hardest part for him, was watching me throw up. Even though he watched me throw up numerous times throughout my pregnancy, for whatever reason, he said watching me throw up while I was in labor was like the hardest part for him, which I thought was very funny. But yes, my nurse was amazing. She came in about every half hour to check on me, to check my contractions, to check my pain level. And I had already told her that I wasn't against the epidural, but was definitely trying to avoid it. And so she was very much on board with my whole plan, and she wasn't like pushing the epidural on me or in any way, or pushing pain meds on me or in any way. But she definitely let me know that if I wanted the epidural, that I would have to speak sooner rather than later, before things got too bad. So I probably around 10 o'clock, so my water got broken around 7:30, and I think Pitocin started about 8 o'clock. So I'm gonna say that labor started at 8 o'clock, like full on like active labor, because as soon as they hooked me up to Pitocin, it was like from 0 to 100. So around 10 o'clock she came in and she checked my contractions, and they were every 2 minutes, and I told her they were about a 7 on the pain scale. And my contractions weren't high up in my belly, like they weren't in the whole of my belly. They were in my underbelly, my hips, and my lower back. So it was everywhere down there. It was super painful and super uncomfortable, and I was kind of downplaying my pain a lot to my nurse because I didn't want to sound like a wimp, and I was so discouraged. I felt like a failure. I went into childbirth expecting to be able to handle the pain because I had read so many positive birth stories and watched so many positive birth stories, and I trusted my body, and I went into my labor thinking that I could handle it. And here I was at 2 centimeters, and I just felt like a mess. And I asked her, at that point I was laboring on the bed on all fours though, and whenever I would have a contraction, I would lean into my elbows and lean into the back of the bed. And I asked her, like, what positions are good for, like, when you have back labor or when it's really bad in your hips. And she told me what I was doing was exactly right, like that is the best position to be in. And so then she taught my husband how to do counter pressure, so how he would like push into my lower back and then move his hands out and then squeeze my hips in and then pull them out and push back in. So she taught him how to do that. And so from like 10:30 on, he was doing counter pressure every time I had a contraction, which was every 2 minutes or less. So my poor husband did not have it easy, and I could not have him push hard enough on my back. Like, it was never hard enough, even though he was pushing with all his might. My husband is a big guy, like he's big and strong, and it was wearing him out, and he was exhausted too. He didn't get a lot of sleep the night before. I only got an hour of sleep the night before, because how are you supposed to sleep before you go to have your baby? I don't understand how people do that. I was way too excited and way too nervous. So we were both running on very little sleep, and we were both pretty excited and nervous and stressed out, especially since I was in so much pain right off the bat, and we were expecting me to be in labor for hours and hours. So yeah, so I'd say about 10:30 is when she taught my husband how to do the counter pressure, and that helped so much. And I was feeling a lot more encouraged at that point because I had something to help with the pain. Definitely helped with my pain a lot. And so yeah, so she left, and we were just kind of working together, my husband and I. My voice is like losing me. So yeah, she left, and then my husband and I were able to just work together by ourselves, working through the contractions. I was trying to take it one contraction at a time. In between contractions, I was texting my sister-in-law and my mom to keep them informed as best as I could, because I was obviously in a lot of pain, but I wanted to text them for as long as I could before it got too bad. Oh, also, I forgot to mention, I did get a COVID test. I probably got my COVID test around 8:30 or 9, and it was one of the rapid tests, so my nurse literally just had to stick a swab up my nose and down, and then up my nose and down. It was about 1 Mississippi on each side. It was uncomfortable. It felt like chlorine water, and it stung a little bit, but it wasn't anywhere near as bad as I thought it would be, and I was so happy to get it over with. And then we got the results within like an hour and a half, and they were negative, which was what we were hoping for since I hadn't been anywhere. So at that point, I could take my mask off and labor without my mask on. We were able to have our masks off when she wasn't in the room, but whenever she came into the room, we had to put our masks on. So yeah, 10:30 on, my husband and I were just working together. We got into a routine. Every time that I had a break, I would just sit up in the bed and kind of like move my neck and try to relax as best I could. But I was having a really hard time. I was still very discouraged. And at that point, I was in so much pain, and my breaks were so little that I had already thought, oh no, it's too late to get an epidural. Even though I'm only 2 centimeters, I'm in so much pain. There's no way I can stay still long enough to receive an epidural. So I was very just like stuck in between not wanting an epidural and the option of not even being able to get one, even though I was in so much pain, if that makes sense. But yeah, I'd say an hour went by and my husband and I just working together, and then it just got so bad that I got so desperate, and I asked her for some IV pain meds, and she offered me fentanyl or hydromorphone. I don't know if I pronounced that right. So I opted for the hydromorphone. I texted my mom to see if it was okay. Actually, I had my husband text my mom to see if it was okay. She knows, she gave birth to 9 babies, so she knows a lot about like childbirth and pain meds and what's good and what's not and what's dangerous and whatever. So my husband texted my mom through my phone asking if the hydromorphone was okay, and she came back and she said, yes, that's fine. It'll help you relax. And so we went ahead and I got the hydromorphone. Within like 10 minutes, she put it into my IV, and then like another 10 minutes it took effect. And the only risks is it can make her sleepy and it could make me sleepy. And she could only give it to me every 2 hours. And once I got to like 6 or 7 centimeters, she couldn't give it to me because it would be too close to birth and it could have a negative effect on her when she was born. So I was just like, all right, I'll take 1 dose of it and see how it works out. So after I got the hydromorphone, again, it took effect within 10 minutes, and it would just take the edge off of the contractions. I'd say it made the contractions like 20 to 30% easier, and my husband was still doing the counter pressure, and my contractions were probably less than 2 minutes apart at this point. And she had checked me right before I got the hydromorphone, and she checked me at 11:30, I think it was, and I was 3 centimeters dilated, and I think she said I was 100% effaced at that point. So 3 centimeters, 100% effaced. I had been in labor since 8 o'clock, and it was 11:30, and I had only progressed 1 centimeter. I was heartbroken and so discouraged and so upset. I just wanted to cry, but I just kept breathing through my contractions. Another thing, my breathing technique that I had whenever I had a contraction, I learned from Bridget Taylor on YouTube. She's a doula. And the breathing practice I used was breathing in for 4, really, really deep, and then breathing out for 6. And sometimes if I needed it, when I breathed out, I would moan a little bit. I never screamed, I never yelled, I would just moan slightly. And so from 11:30 on, I had the hydromorphone in me and my husband doing the counter pressure, and the hydromorphone helped me relax so much in between my contractions that I was able to kind of zone out and take like a mini cat nap. So whenever I'd have a contraction, I would lean into the back of the bed on my elbows, and then whenever I had a break, I would just kind of sit up straight in like crisscross applesauce and just kind of like zone out completely, honestly. And then yeah, that was my routine for about a solid hour. That's what we were doing, my husband and I. And then about an hour into the hydromorphone is when it started to wear off. So it's like 12:30 at this point, and my nurse had gone on lunch. So she was supposed to come in every half hour, and we hadn't seen her for like 45 minutes. And I was just like, man, where is she? Like, I kind of want to like tell her that it's like wearing off and I'm in a lot of pain. I wanted to know if I could get like my next dose like set up for me so I didn't have to wait any longer than I had to, because it was already wearing off and I wanted to get it as soon as it was safe to get it again. And so we had found out that my nurse actually went on lunch because I was only 3 centimeters, and she put me on the pain meds, and you know, she thought that we were good, and I don't blame her. I would have thought the same thing. So yeah, we just keep trekking on, waiting for her to show up, and I just start feeling awful. Like my contractions are at an all-time high, definitely a 10 on the pain scale, and I start feeling pressure. And so I called the nurse's station, and they asked me what was wrong, and I was just like, hi, can I please see my nurse? I'm in so much pain, and I'm feeling a lot of pressure. And I could barely talk at that point. I don't know why I didn't have my husband do that, but for whatever reason, I did it. And so my nurse comes in like 2 minutes later, and she's like, what's going on? And I'm just like, at that point, I think I had started involuntarily pushing. And so I told her, I'm sorry, I know I'm not supposed to push yet, but I'm feeling so much pressure, and I couldn't help it. I pushed a little bit. And she was just like, okay, turn over, let me check you. So at this point, it's probably close to 1 o'clock, I'd say, because 11:30, yeah, it's close to 1 o'clock at this point. And so she asked me to turn over. So anyway, I turn over, and I am in so much pain. I'm just like, I told her, I don't even think I can lay down still enough for you to check me. And she's just like, well, just try. I'll be as quick as I can. So somehow I got on my back, and I had not been on my back the whole entire labor. That felt like the worst idea to me. It did not feel natural at all. It was the last position I wanted to be in, was on my back. So finally, for the first time in labor, I move on to my back, and she checks me. And my husband and I are so discouraged because I'm in so much pain. There's no way that I can take an epidural and stand still enough to receive one. And we're expecting me to be at like a 5 at the most. A 5, maybe a 6 centimeters at the very most. And I would have been happy had I been at 6 centimeters. So she checked me, and she goes, wow, you made a lot of progress on your own. And so my husband and I are just like, oh good, like 5-6 centimeters. And she goes, I'd say you're about a 9. And my husband and I at that point just looked at each other, and we both screamed. We were like, what? Like, we both looked at each other, and we were so relieved. And that was probably the most emotional I got in my whole birth and labor, was when she told me I was 9 centimeters, because a whole hour and a half before I was only 3. So my husband and I were so relieved, and she's just like, I'm gonna go call your doctor. I'll be right back. And we're just like, okay. And then she leaves, and my husband's like, do you think you can do this? And I'm just like, oh yeah, no, I can do this. At that point, I was like so relieved and so happy. I was so close to the pushing stage, and my mom always told me that the pushing was the best part for her. So she called my doctor, and she comes back in, and she said, okay, let's try some practice pushes. And I was just like, okay, that sounds good. And so she has me do one push, and she says, okay, close your legs. So she had me literally like this, laying down on my back, to keep my legs closed and to keep her inside. So yeah, so we were just waiting for my doctor to get there at that point, and I was having to stay on my back, and that's when my contractions were at the very worst. They were completely like 10, and these are Pitocin contractions as well, which I hear are worse than normal, like natural labor contractions. So I'm laying on my back, and every time I have a contraction, I just have to squeeze my husband's hand, and I just kind of like moaned through them all. And that was the worst part, was definitely waiting for my doctor to get there, between being told I was a 9 and being able to push. Thankfully, my doctor did not take very long. She was only just right across the street. That's where her office is. So she was able to get there pretty quickly. And she walks in and she's like, well, let's have a baby. And so at that point, the baby nurse comes in, and then there was a student as well. And at that point, and it was a male student. At that point, I just did not care. So I didn't say anything. It was fine that he was in there at that point, because I just did not have it in me to complain or mention anything about him not being there. In the long run, I'm glad he was there. But yeah, I was happy that he was able to see it, because it was definitely like a different birth than what most people would see, I think. I don't know. It was very quick. So yeah, my doctor gets there. It's probably like, I don't know. My track of time for my labor and delivery honestly is way off. I'm probably saying it way wrong. I have no idea what time she got there. But I know that I only pushed for 23 minutes. So she got there, she said, let's have a baby. So they put my legs up, and the nurse and my husband were holding my legs for me and supporting me. The baby nurse was kind of like in a tizzy because nothing was ready in our room yet, so she had to get everything ready really, really quickly, and the student was helping her. And so I started pushing, and at that point, once you start pushing, your contractions kind of get further apart. So my contractions were probably 4 at the max minutes apart at this point between pushes, and I would get about 3 pushes each contraction. So I'd say it probably took about 5 contractions to get her out, and the pushing was definitely the best part because it gives you something to do during the contractions, and it like counteracts the pain, and you kind of work against it. And I never really believed it when people would say that pushing is the best part. I kind of thought that I kind of thought it was bullcrap, to be honest, but it's true. Pushing is the best part. I started pushing. I never felt the ring of fire, and I think it's because my doctor was so patient and so amazing. She kept like squeezing all of that, like, you know, that gel lubey stuff all over me, and she was stretching me out between contractions, like really working my area to stretch. So I never felt the ring of fire. So I was really, really glad that I didn't feel that, because that was one of the pains that I was like most scared of, was the ring of fire. Didn't even feel that. I didn't experience that at all. I know that's not normal, but that's how it was for me. And so yeah, like I said, it was about 5 contractions, 3 pushes each. And at one point she offered an episiotomy. She said, I can give you a small little cut and you can have your baby in the next push. And I looked at her and I was like, and she's like, you don't have to, like, you can still do it naturally. And I was just like, yeah, I want to try to not have an episiotomy, because I heard it's really hard to recover from one. So she didn't, and it turns out she was only out 2 pushes later. And when they told me her head was born, I laid back because I was gonna wait for the next contraction to push the rest of her body out. And my nurse was like, no, keep watching, because she just slipped out. Like her whole head and body came out at the same time, and it did not hurt. It just felt like such a relief, like kind of like like that's the best way to explain it. And then they placed her on me, and oh my gosh, it was the best feeling in the world. She didn't cry a lot when she was born, but she looked really great right off the bat. She wasn't super blue. She had a little bit of vernix, but she looked perfect, and she was so, so precious. And again, she was born at 2:32. I only pushed for 23 minutes. I had 3 minor tears, 2 on the side, which were really small, and then my doctor told me a really small one in my perineum, depends on how you say it. So she spent about 10 minutes stitching me up, and I don't think she numbed me because I felt everything. And as terrible as that sounds, it really didn't hurt because I was on such a high of adrenaline, and I was holding my baby for the first time, and I was so relieved and so excited and so proud of myself. I felt like $1,000,000 at that point. I looked like trash, but I felt like $1,000,000. And my husband and I were in just such awe, and we were so proud of ourselves that we went through the whole transition period by ourselves without even knowing it. So yeah, my husband was just the absolute best birth partner. I wouldn't have had it any other way. And I'm still in such awe that we were able to do it. Completely natural, without, minus the IV pain med. And yeah, we're so happy. We're on cloud 9. She's been such a good baby so far. She sleeps through the night. Like, we have to wake her up to feed her every 2 to 3 hours. Otherwise, she'll just keep sleeping. And she sleeps a lot during the day, but I know that'll change soon. And I know that babies have stages where they're good, and then when they're not so good and they're not as easy to take care of. But we're soaking up all of the easy moments for right now. But yeah, as far as postpartum, I've recovered so well. Sometimes I just forget that I'm postpartum because I already feel pretty much back to my normal self. And so I have to keep reminding myself that I am still recovering, even though I feel good. Not everything is back to normal yet, and I need to take it easy. But yeah, that's my positive birth story during a pandemic. I wouldn't have changed anything about my birth experience, even though I went through so much pain for a long time. I'd say it was about a solid 3 hours where my pain level was like a 9 at least. I wouldn't have changed it because it was so worth it, and you just feel so good afterwards, and the recovery is so much easier. I don't really have anything else to compare it to, but based on stories and based on people that I know in real life, I know that my recovery, like, this isn't normal for me to feel this good immediately after giving birth. She's 10 days old right now, and I'd say the day after we got home from the hospital, so she was 4 days old, I almost felt completely normal. So yeah, if you need any encouragement to try not have an epidural or an elective C-section or anything like that, if you really want to try to give birth naturally, the postpartum is your main motivator, let me tell you. But yeah, I'm trying to think if I left out anything. It was really hard for me to film this video because I didn't like write anything down or take notes or anything. I just kind of like diarrhea of the mouth. So I hope I didn't miss anything. I am so thankful that she came as fast as she did. I wouldn't have been able to do it for any longer. And again, I'm just so shocked that I progressed so quickly. In an hour and a half, I went from 3 centimeters to 9 centimeters. And then, like, after she checked me, I think it was 5 to 10 minutes later that they said I was complete and ready to push. So it's just wild, and I would do it all over again, honestly. Still remember the pain of the contractions. I know they say that mothers usually forget the feeling of a contraction. I still very much remember it, but now that I know I can handle it, and now that I know that what I was feeling like wasn't, fake. Like, when I was in the most pain and I thought that I wasn't progressing, I was just progressing very, very quickly, which explains why I was in so much pain so fast. But yeah, I hope this is an encouragement to all of you mothers out there giving birth during a pandemic or not. I hope it encourages you in some way or another. You truly can still have a positive birth experience, even without pain meds, and even during a pandemic. It's still the most wonderful thing, the most wonderful experience that you can have as a woman. I think that's everything. I'm sure I'm forgetting something. I'll try to write some more notes in the description down below if I forget anything about my birth experience. I'm definitely going to do a video about postpartum and a video about breastfeeding, because breastfeeding has kind of been a roller coaster, but we're getting through it. So yeah, keep an eye out for those. And yeah, I think that's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your prayers, for your support, for your encouragement throughout my whole entire pregnancy. It's been so fun to document it, and I hope you guys will follow along on this new chapter of my life as well. I'm just on cloud 9. So yeah, thank you so much for watching. I hope you're all staying healthy and safe during this time. I hope you're all having a wonderful week. Goodbye.